Hi, this is Iftekhar Pathan. I'm the co-founder of Meraklis Technologies, and I'd like to welcome all the participants to another session of the online summit. Today I have a very important and a guest who is going to speak about her experiences. She is the CEO at Atma and is an alumnus of Telfer School of Management. She is actually at the fulcrum of all the growth and the expansion of the network of Atma, who's doing amazingly great work. Atma, basically, she would obviously tell us more, but is a resource sharing collaboration platform. My guest also is the member of Basra Social Impact Leadership Program, advisor on Soul's Arc, and she's also a panelist for organizations like Unlimited India, Inspired, UNICEF, and most importantly, also Atma's resident coffee connoisseur and landscape artist. So welcome, Mary. Great to have you on the show.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. I have my coffee with me, so we're ready for today. So today, I'm excited to be able to share with you Atma's work and some of the things that we've been thinking about in terms of how nonprofits are being affected by the challenges of the COVID pandemic. I'll just give you a little bit of more of a background about Atma so you can understand what is our expertise and sort of thought process around the topic I'll be presenting today, which is a masterclass in re-examining program relevance and redesign. So we at Atma are an accelerator for education nonprofits. And that really means for us that when we were founded, we realized really clearly what an important role that NGOs play in the social sector and in the lives of students who don't necessarily have the economic means to afford the most expensive education options. And for us, we realized really quickly how important NGOs are in bringing high quality education to children and students who need it the most. And so we decided that the best way that we could really influence the lives of young people would be to support those organizations who are doing incredible work. And that support or help turned into what we now call the Atma Accelerator program, through which we've worked with over 75 organizations from across the country who themselves reach out to lakhs and lakhs of students. Since the very beginning of this crisis in particular, we've been very concerned about how nonprofits are going to be affected, not just in terms of the way that the crisis is going to be impacting funding for the sector, but also the fact that this has significantly changed life as we know it. So I'm going to be taking you through some of our thought process in terms of examining your programs and program relevance and redesigning for the scenario and the environment that we find ourselves in now. So I just want to double check, can everybody see my screen? Just let me know if you can. And as I'm going through the content today, if you have a question, please field it in the questions box or in the chat cycle. As I'm presenting my screen, I can't see all of those things at the same time, but please list out your comments and questions there, and maybe we'll just take a break at a certain point, look through some of those things, and otherwise we'll collect all of them for the end when we have about 20 minutes set aside for question and answer. So I hope that that works for everybody. There was a short introduction about me, but I'll just say that I am the CEO at Atma. I'm luckily not the founder at Atma. Somebody else did the paperwork. My dear friend Haley and another colleague were the co-founders, but I took over from them fairly early on, and I've been the leader of Atma for over 10 years now. We do have the accelerator program. We also provide strategic consulting and support on specific projects to organizations in education, as well as organizations that support children to thrive in their day-to-day lives. And so if you have questions or concerns that you feel like aren't getting covered here today, please let me know. I'll give my contact details. You feel free to reach out to us. The point of Atma is that we are here to support nonprofits. So whatever questions, concerns, linkages you're looking for, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always happy to hear from everyone. So with that, obviously, as of, I think for me, it was about March 16th, the world changed significantly. And if you just have a piece of paper and a pen with you, just take a few minutes to write out, what are the big things that have changed for you since the lockdown, or the unofficial lockdown, and then the official lockdown started. So just take about 30 seconds to reflect on that. And maybe as you're doing that, you can share it in the chat function. My question is, what has changed for you? Does anybody want to share what their main changes that they've seen have been? In the chat.
Well, before anyone else asks that, Mary, if you can allow me to say what has changed for me, I can do that.
Sure. What are some of the big changes that you faced?
Well, I think one is that this hit you out of the blue, so I was absolutely not prepared for a change like this. It is the true disruption that I've seen. So I was completely lost in terms of what to do. I was just stuck at home and did not know how the transition from working out in the world and being captured into a room and then still doing my work. So that is one big challenge I sort of faced. So that is one. The other is I thought there is a lot of uncertainty as far as my future is concerned. So I was scared and I was unsure in terms of what the future holds for me. So I think in terms of my thinking, these are two major changes that I sort of immediately.
And I can see somebody here has said that there's been a global awakening and a resurrection of human values. That's amazing. And I can agree and empathize with that as well. Thank you for sharing that. So I'll just go back to, I have a couple of questions, so I'll just go back to those. Then I guess a bigger question is, what has changed for your communities? So the communities that you're serving, and if you can just share that in the chat function, I think that would be the easiest thing. What has changed for your communities that you serve? So I think for us at Atma, what we have seen is that so many of our communities that are served by the nonprofits that we work with have gone from striving to get better livelihoods, to increase their earning capabilities, to being in a place where they're just trying to have basic food security. And that has been really startling and has made us feel like we've taken a major step back, or not even back, but a step down in terms of what we had expected for our development goals. So keeping these things in mind, one, that things have changed significantly in all of our lives, and simultaneously changed so much in the lives of the communities that we serve. I wanted to touch on what do we mean by relevance and why is this important? And so I was speaking to someone the other day and I said, you know, we really think that relevance, examining program relevance is one of the most important it is the most important conversation that we can be having in the nonprofit community at this time. And the person I was speaking to said, like, but are you saying that what nonprofits have been doing is irrelevant or is no longer relevant? And the fact of the matter is no. There are so many great causes. There are so many great organizations out there that are doing really beautiful work. It might not be the work that I'm doing, but it doesn't mean that it's not important. The difference is around us has changed so much. And we need to bring our work and we need to think about the work that we do in a very different way now to make sure that it continues to be relevant to the stakeholders in our community. And I think that, you know, we've had these conversations about, I think in the nonprofit community, one of the things we keep talking about is fundraising. How can I fundraise? Where can I get funds? Who can I talk to? How do I raise money? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so for me, program relevance is actually the most important thing. Is your community finding value in what you do? And if they are, then it's much easier to make a case for all the other things that you're going to be doing, changing, moving around for yourself and for your organization. And as this relevance piece is re-examined and sort of falls into place more clearly for you in this new environment, then it will also make other things that are difficult, obviously, a little bit easier, like fundraising. So for us, it's to open the fundraising question first doesn't necessarily make sense. First, I want to understand, do we have a program that is fundable and that people want to fund before we get into the fundraising piece? And so for us, this is really the most important question that nonprofits, NGOs across the country should be asking at this point in time. We are all here to create an impact, and so that really has to come first. What is the impact that we want to create today, and how has our path to get to that impact changed? So just to sort of build off of this, I just put together this really simple piece, which is that typically we had always thought of having inputs that we collect from the world around us. Then we have some sort of specific model that our organization is executing, whether that is having a school, or whether it's having community centers, or running clinics, or doing workshops, or doing community level capacity building, having social workers and counselors. Whatever that is, you have some sort of model that you're operating in. And the point of all of that work is to create a specific impact. And that model and the impact that you're trying to create come from that common purpose as an organization that you've set out to be. So that is your vision, your mission, and your values. So that is just the basic of how things are. All of these things, the model and the inputs, have been decided based on specific assumptions that we have. So for example, an assumption that we might have is that our community has enough food to eat, and therefore we can work on things like mental health, or we can work on things like improving earning capacity and livelihoods, whatever it may be. Now, in our current scenario, all of these things, this environment around us has changed so much. So your purpose as an organization, your vision, your mission, and values, that is the core. That stays the same. But those assumptions that you have based your model on and the inputs that you need on may have changed dramatically. So it may be that the community that you serve doesn't have enough food to eat anymore. So before getting into training people in long-term skill development, so say, for example, a lot of livelihood programs right now are working towards health professions. So if you want to train young people to become nurses, that's great, but it doesn't work to ask somebody to be in a 2-year study program if they don't have food today. So we're going to have to figure out some way to move that person beyond that immediate need to be able to move them into the next phase. And so those are some of the things that, this is why for us, relevance is so important, because those basic assumptions have changed so much. And then that's going to need us to revise our inputs and the model within which we're operating. Okay. And so this takes us to basically a guiding framework for program relevance examination and redesign. There are 5 different components to this. Evaluating the community need is the first. So understanding from your community, where do they stand today and what are their needs? And the community can tell you much better than we can, especially in a dynamic situation, what their needs are. So this is a really important place to start. The next is reassessing organizational impact. So has that chain to impact become a lot longer than it was previously? The third is that we will need to conduct, this is what Atma is coining, conducting a program surgery. So it might be that some of the work that you're doing is still very relevant, but the way that you're delivering it needs to change. So for example, you were doing face-to-face counseling in the community with women. It might be that you can't do that face-to-face anymore, and so you need to change your mode of delivery. Or it might be that something you were doing isn't that relevant anymore in the current situation, and therefore that's something that you're gonna maybe put into hibernation for a little while. The next phase is phase 4, which is assessing the changes to the resource needs. So this is really like, what do you need? Those sort of that input tile that we looked at before. What are the resources that you need in order to be able to operationalize your program? And then how do you move to that next phase, operationalizing the program changes? So these are the 5 levels, and through my talk today, I'm going to try and cover off each of these five pieces. So I'm just going to pause from the screen share for a moment just to see if there's any questions now. Is everyone able to, you're able to see me? Were you able to see the slides in that time?
Yes, I think we can at least.
Okay.
We can, yes.
Okay. Are there any questions that anyone want to put in the, oh, you didn't get to see the slides. Apologies for that. What we'll do is I'll just share the link here. Oops. And you guys can go through them at your leisure. Great. Maybe I'll just do that now, just so everyone is on the same page. Okay, can everybody see now? Okay.
Yeah.
So here we have, so this, I'll just go here. This is what I was talking about, is that we have our vision, mission, and values, which are definitely going to stay the same throughout. But this input, model, and impact, the inputs and the model have changed in this time because the assumptions with which we base these things on have changed. And so that just takes us to the guiding framework, which is evaluating the community need, reassessing organizational impact, conducting that program surgery, assessing changes to the resource needs, and then operationalizing program changes. Is that clear?
Yep.
Okay. I'll just come back here. Okay, great. I will do that, Abhijit. Abhijit's giving me some tips. This is helpful. Okay. And please, somebody just take yourself off mute and tell me if it's not working. All right, so I will just go forward to the next component. There we go. All right, is this okay? Can everyone see these slides now? Okay. So, evaluating program need. So this is really the first and most important step. We never want to build a program or make changes without consulting with our stakeholders. They're the people who can tell us, especially in a dynamic situation, what is it that the situation looks like? What are they seeing as their own, their neighbors, their colleagues, their peers' needs at this point in time? And how can we think about being more responsive to that? And I think one of the things that I want to be clear about in this whole guiding framework is that this is a thought process, and all of these are things that we're asking you to actually set aside time and think about. It's not something that you're doing in lieu of if your organization has decided to do relief work. It's not something that you're doing and not doing that relief work if that's what your community needs and you've decided to do. It is something that you are doing and setting aside to prepare yourself for the future. We know that the impacts of the pandemic are going to be not just as lockdown is happening, but are going to continue, especially for the nonprofit community, over the next at least 18 to 24 months. And that's something that we need to be prepared for. And so this is really about evaluating your community needs, yes, as they stand today, but also understanding how is that potentially going to evolve. So the questions that need to be answered at this point in time are, what are the key needs of your community? How has this changed today versus how you were operating previously? And then what is it likely to be in the next 6 to 9 months and beyond that? And how do you start moving yourself into that scenario? And it might be that there's not, that you're going to have different phases to what like we have had for the country, different unlock phases. It might be for your program, you have different unlock components as well. So the different steps to this are really to define your community of stakeholders. So who are your primary and your secondary stakeholders? Who do you need to speak to? So for example, we work in education. We need to talk to our students. We need to talk to their parents. We need to potentially talk to the headmasters and teachers at the schools that they're attending, or talk to community leaders from around where our students are coming from, to get a real grasp on what the situation looks like for them and what is a meaningful way to reach our students in the current scenario. And I think also one of the things that we need to be very cognizant of as a sector is making sure that you hear people's voices. If you're working with children, if you're working with people with disabilities, working with women, make sure that their voice is included in that process. Then we also need to design that needs assessment process. So once you understand who they are, design an assessment that you think is going to elicit the best responses. So whether that's a mapping, whether it's consultations, whether it's surveys, whether it's a roundtable or conversations that your team have, but then you collate all the responses. And assess the relevance of older needs as well as the requirement of new needs. And then understand from within that, what are things that are within your skills and capabilities today? And what might be things that you need to partner with somebody else for? So you can start doing some of that bifurcation. And then conduct that needs assessment before you make any programmatic decisions. That's the most important thing, okay? So moving on to the next step is reassessing your organizational impact. So really this is understanding that impact that you want to create might have changed. So one example that we've seen within our portfolio is that one of our organizations works on livelihoods. Now, for all of the young people and aspirants that they work with, livelihood and skilling to get jobs is incredibly important, especially now when so many people have lost jobs. However, the urgency of that is paramount, and we need to maybe reassess where those young people are going to be getting jobs and how they're going to be earning an income. So the questions that need to be answered here are the long-term outcomes you were trying to achieve as an organization achievable still in the next 3 to 5 years, given the impact of COVID? So for instance, in that livelihood example, is it reasonable to think that we're going to get people on the path of careers in the next 3 to 5 years? Possibly, but in the short and medium term, that what we expect to be the outcomes might have changed. And that really goes to that next question, which is short and medium term outcomes. What short and medium term outcomes do you need to achieve, which might be different from the current ones, to reach that same long-term outcome? So it might be that we're not able to put somebody on a path in a formal sector like we used to. So say, I know for this organization, they had tie-ups with people like Star Bazaar or Starbucks. So those might not be places that are hiring at the same pace right now. But it might be that we're setting young people up to start their own businesses and get some real world experience and be able to earn incomes in this time. Do we need new indicators or methods to measure the same outcome? So this is really, and I hope that this is something that everyone is thinking about deeply, is like, what are the ways that you measure the outcome that you've set out to do? And are there some assumptions that are no longer valid for you? So say, for example, in livelihoods, is it that somebody needs to start earning today and doesn't have time to come for a long classroom session where they might have had the leeway from their family to do that before? So here, this next steps in the toolkit are really to re-examine your logical framework for your program. And this might be for multiple programs that you're running, to make sure you're able to touch upon the different areas in terms of your long-term outcomes, your short and mid-term outcomes, and then how do you go about reaching those goals? And are there assumptions that you had before? And like the example that I gave earlier, which is that we had seen that the assumption that the community has enough food to eat, so that their day-to-day well-being was not dependent maybe on your program, but maybe today it is. Oops. So these are some of the things to keep in mind as you go through this. And like I said, this is not something that is like a knee-jerk reaction. What we're advocating is that you as an organization set aside time with your key people, your leadership, your trustees, your boards, to actually think through these questions. And this is a really important time to start doing that. Okay, so then the next step is conducting a program surgery. And just before I go into this piece, is there any questions or thoughts that are coming up that I need to pause for, or we need to get a better understanding of? No?
Mary, there are no questions that we can see right now. So we'll carry on and we'll take the questions towards the end.
Perfect. Just jump in if I need to
Sure.
explain something further.
Yeah, I'm keeping a tab on that, so I will.
Good, perfect. Okay, so then this next step is conducting a program surgery. So when we were developing this framework, we were really talking about, okay, what does it really mean? It means that in any given program, there's lots of different components of what we do. So it might be, so for this one, I want to use the example of maybe a mother and child health program that's running in a community. So there might be outreach that normally used to happen where social workers would go out and find pregnant and lactating mothers, young girls who might become pregnant soon, to understand what are their health factors, how can we help them, or identify babies who are underweight already. It might be then that they come into a clinic, we weigh them, we take the BMI of the children, we provide supplements to them, we make sure that they're getting to see doctors that they need to. So there's lots of different components to this, to a program like that, that need to be re-examined in light of COVID. And so I think there's these 4 questions, and they really come to this idea of what is core, what is flexible, what is completely new, and what is now obsolete. So what don't we need anymore that we were doing previously? So say, for example, so the questions here are, which components of your programs remain intact? What is core? So the idea in this organization would be that what is core to us is being able to serve mothers and babies to make sure that they're able to remain healthy. So that is core, and that goes back to like, what is your vision, your mission, and your values? Those things are going to stay the same. You want to make sure that you're continuing to feed those, you're continuing to serve those core things. And so that might mean making sure that there are some components of what you do that don't get compromised. But the mode in which that you are serving those individuals might be flexible. So components of your program that need to be reimagined. So if we were in the same situation and we needed to do outreach to a community to find out who the new babies and the pregnant women were, we might need to reimagine how we do that outreach now. Are there mobile and technology tools that we can use to help us with that? Is there like a calling network or individual community leaders that we can count on to keep us updated on what's happening? Those are things that we would need to be flexible about. Then what are new components that are imperative to be introduced? So for this example, we're talking about the health of individuals, and being able to have the right food to eat would be something that is imperative to being able to have a healthy child, to have a healthy pregnancy. And so in this example, new would be, in the past, maybe you weren't giving out rations, like basic food to people to eat and to maintain, sort of to be able to realize your mission as an organization. But now that's a new component that you're gonna have to include until that area or that community has more economic stability where they can ensure that they are able to provide that for themselves. And then there might be components of your program that are no longer relevant or are obsolete. So for example, a lot of organizations that we work with would have like holiday programs where they would have parties to serve the community and just bring people together. It might be that, you know what, that's just not possible anymore. There's no way that we're gonna have a party where we gather people together in the community. So that's just something we're gonna park. And then in the future, if we can bring it back, we will. But at this point in time, we just don't see that being possible in the next 6 to 12 months. So that would be an example of something that is then obsolete. It might be that that feel-good factor that would be achieved by having like a party for Ganpati might be something that you bring into another aspect of what you're doing. So the values with which you do your work should remain, but don't hold on to things just because there's something that you've always done. And so this is really where we want to say, throughout an entire program, go through and really examine and question what is important and what can we just let go of and is not a thing that we are going to do anymore. And I think this is something that's really important to keep in mind, and that the world has changed so significantly that we don't want to just hold on to things for the sake of it. One example that I have here is recently I was talking to somebody who's organizing a conference, and they were saying, we want people to still feel like they're attending a conference. And so we're gonna even have, so oftentimes at conferences, there will be like the first day of the conference, and then after the first day, there's like a party where people can come together and network. Now, through a Zoom conference, that's a lot more difficult, but they still wanted people to feel like they were at a conference. And so they were planning on even sending them all like a cold drink that they could all drink together on a Zoom party. And it's a really nice sentiment, but I think after spending a whole day on Zoom at an online conference, people aren't gonna wanna hang back and just have a cold drink online with people. So we need to like really reimagine what the future looks like, and not just do the same thing we did offline in an online or revised format. We can let go of some things, and it might be sad, but it's realistic. So then the last question here is, what time frame do we need to undertake the above categorization? So is there something that is coming up for you guys that is urgent? Are there timelines that you're working towards that you need to really keep in mind to make sure that you're conducting the surgery and the redesign process accordingly so that you're able to serve your communities in the best way? So the toolkit here really is listing out all the activities that are undertaken as part of your program. If you have a logical framework, if you have a standard operating procedure, if you have operating manuals, these would be the places that you need to reference to make sure you're able to go through all of this. Then categorize them sort of as we have put down. Identify the new activities and the resources, so inputs and capabilities that are going to be required for the same. So I think when we think resources, so the example that I gave is if we have to start giving out rations, obviously assembling the rations might be part of the inputs that you need. But also if we think that something new that we need to do is offer more technology-based services, it might be that we also need a skill set on our team that we hadn't had in the past. And these are things to be really clear about and understand, like, how are we going to get that for our organization at this point in time. And then make sure that you have that logical framework clear. So any of these things that you have done, make sure to plug it back into the logical framework that you have. And both for flexible and new elements, clearly call out a time frame for which you think these are going to hold true. So if you think you're going to be providing rations for the time being, set a time frame for that and understand that's something that you're going to have to, that will end after a certain period of time. Yeah? Was there a question?
Yeah, so Mary, fantastic. Just want to go through some questions that I have here, and I also want to make you aware that we've completed about 42 minutes. And we'll take some questions now. So
okay,
we have,
can I just the last 2 slides, and then I'll definitely get to all the questions.
Done, no worries. Yeah.
Okay, so just I've spent a lot of time on the first few, and every time we present this, it goes on a little bit. So then obviously we need to assess the resources that you need. So like I said, this is financial, human, physical, skills, and capabilities. So be really clear about what all of these things are, and you're going to have to also revise your budgets to make sure you're accounting for these things. And then the last is, how do you operationalize these program changes? So understanding who are the stakeholders who these changes are going to affect, what are the timeframes you expect the changes to be made in, and then what are the risks associated with these changes. There are definitely going to be trade-offs as you are redefining. So one question for us, especially in the education sector, is if we are opting to do an online service to students, what happens to those kids who don't have access to a phone or even WhatsApp? So understanding what those trade-offs are. The next steps here are defining the communications plan for each of these stakeholders, making sure that they're able to get onboarded to the changes, and then defining a review system. Anything that you're changing in your organization, you need to make sure that you are reviewing how those changes are going and how they're being implemented. So that just takes us back to this whole framework, and making sure that, I think that the thing that I really want to drive home is that we want to make sure that your key stakeholders are in the room for each of these steps. And key stakeholders should always include your community members, and make sure that there's enough time set aside for each of these activities so that you're able to think deeply about each area, and that it's not just a quick one-time activity. Right. Okay, so we'll get to questions now. Great.
Yeah, so Mary, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. I thought it was very well laid out. And I have a question from the audience, says, when and why should we undertake program design and development and redesign? And the second part of the same question is the design intended for the program's population group, taking into account their unique needs and geographical location?
Okay, thank you, Anil, for asking that question. I'll answer the first part. Maybe I can get clarity from you on the second part. When and why should you undertake program redesign? So I think that I would say now is the important thing. You need, like, things have changed so significantly. All of us need to be re-examining those assumptions on which we built our earlier programs. And so really the question, what I would say is that this is a very urgent issue for all nonprofits. If you are seeking new funding, and I don't want to just make this about funding, it's really about what does your community need today? And that has changed significantly since the beginning of lockdown. And so if you want to continue to serve your community in a relevant way, you yourself need to change. And so I would say this is urgent. I think every organization should be doing it. I know at Atma, this is something that we're doing. This is why we've designed this relevance and redesign framework, because things have changed dramatically. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. But I'm not understanding the second part of the question.
The second part, I'll try to decipher it for you. Is it relevant to their target segment, is what I think he means, taking into account their unique needs and geographical location?
So that's it. Like, in this framework, it's just a guideline, right? We've not prescribed anything in particular. These are best practices for any organization to take up. And in their redesign process, they need to consider the unique needs of their communities and the geographical location. So whether that means that you're serving populations that are in, say, a red zone or a containment zone, you're serving some populations that are in a green zone, then obviously your approaches for each would be different. And maybe you're also preparing your program. So maybe, right now the community that we serve is in a containment zone, like a lot of communities here in Mumbai. And over time, we expect them to move to a green zone within which social distancing is still a reality. So is it that we want to have a phased approach to how we are doing our program redesign? So there might be different scenarios under which you're operating. And I think Anil has also added how much customization is needed. It depends on your communities, but I would say that taking in to account, obviously, the needs of each community would be really important. Yeah. And your on-the-ground staff can tell you a lot more about what that looks like.
So Mary, just one question that I had in my mind is your presentation and the way you have put the whole framework is extremely interesting and can be applied to a lot of NGOs and the organizations. Does this come from a certain amount of studies? Is it a tried and tested model? Is it being developed by Atma, or can you tell us a little about the brain of what you just told us?
The framework?
Yes.
No, it's really based on our experience, and we work with so many organizations across the country. These are basic practices that we do anyways with a lot of our organizations, and it's just about understanding at this point in time what is the most important thing. And also we're trying to highlight through this what are the things that we see getting left out more often than not in our organizations as they're thinking about program redesign. And they're thinking about meeting the needs of the day. Yeah.
Fantastic. So this is basically once you have a proof of concept. So I'm sure a lot of NGOs are watching us, and they'll be watching us even post the program. We'll be posting this. So only the guys who've already set the ball rolling need acceleration, and that's why they come to you. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So we work with organizations that are beyond a pilot stage, that have a program on the ground, and we support them in being able to put in place some standard operating procedures and the team and the capacities that they need to be able to excel at that.
Fantastic. And what is within the pandemic at this point of time, what do you think is the relevance of education, and how has that changed the landscape?
So education is very important, but the needs of our students have obviously changed. And I think we need to reimagine what we think of when we say education. And I know that it's not something new that I'm telling my colleagues from the nonprofit community, that well-being and social emotional development of children is the need of the hour. I think everyone is really clear about that. How that's getting delivered has changed. And especially for those of us in Maharashtra and Mumbai and Pune, where schools are not going to be reopening seemingly anytime soon, how that education is getting delivered is definitely going to be changed. And I think we need to be realistic about where our students are at. And I've seen surveys recently where 50% of children have reported that they don't have food security. So they're worried about where their next meal is going to come from. So these are things that we need to consider and understand that learning is not going to happen under a situation where somebody has that much insecurity. Each of us know how much stress that we went through in the beginning of lockdown, not knowing if basic supplies would be there. Imagine you also didn't have money in your bank account. And this is something that needs to be factored into education. And I think that hopefully schools and spaces for education will also become spaces within which students are able to process that trauma, process the challenges, the stressors that they've been under, and do that before we get into academic expectations. And I think that needs to go hand in hand.
So very well said, Mary. And can we know a little bit about what sorts of NGOs do you have in your basket at this point of time? I'm sure there'll be interesting ones that you'd like to tell us about.
Of course. So I think Levitt from LifeLab is presenting after this. LifeLab is an organization that we've been working with for 3 years. We work with I would say in terms of topic, a wide variety of organizations. We have quite a few organizations, including the Apprentice Project and Saturday Art Class, that are focused on social emotional learning. We have some organizations that are focused on prevention of child sexual abuse and educating young people about their sexuality, like Rubaru. We have yet another group of organizations that are focused on academic delivery. And so it is a wide, it is a large group of organizations. We have about 22 organizations that we're working with right now. And we've worked with many, many more over the years. But they're usually young, dynamic teams. I would say for us, the NGOs that we take on have two main criteria that we're looking for. The first is that they have a program that's dedicated to providing high quality education to young people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And the second is that they have a team and an organization in general that's interested in and wants to take on external support and advice. And that's really the two things that we look for. But we do have a very extensive vetting process and to understand who are the organizations that we work with. But I don't want that to mean that any of the organizations who are here today can't reach out. We're always there to support, and we have our own webinars and activities and mentorship that we offer to NGOs. So really, I want people to think of us as a resource and tools, a tool for you and for the sector to support the work that you're doing. So I'll just put our website here also in the chat and my contact details. So please feel free to reach out anytime, and we'd love to hear from you.
I'm sure a lot of people would want to reach out to you, and you're going to be inundated with a lot of call because this is the need of the hour and they really need advice from you.
That's great.
The other thing, Mary, is that how have the rural NGOs fared vis-a-vis the ones in the urban areas? Because there is a lot of exemplary work happening there, but they don't have someone like Atma, so they don't have a reach to you. And how are you doing with those rural area networks?
Yeah, so I'll be very honest, the majority of the organizations that we work with are based in urban centers. It's something that we are trying to fix for in being able to provide more content that's widely accessible. I think for Atma, because our accelerator program is a really intensive program, majority of the organizations that we work with are people that we can we physically interact with in Mumbai or Pune. That's something that's changed in the last while, where we work with organizations who are around the country. But I would still say that we would, if you are running a rural-based NGO, we would love to hear from you. I know that a lot of the organizations in urban centers, at the very least, have more access to funding and funding networks. So I know that that continues to be a challenge for organizations that are not based in some of the major metros. I know that they are facing a lot of different problems. Obviously, we're having this massive reverse migration. So I would love to know more specifically about the day-to-day challenges.
Sure. I think we have Manoj Varnikar asking a more direct question. He says, I work with people with...
Hi, Manoj. So I think the question here is, I work with people with disabilities. How do we bring up their relevance in the current time to our program? So I guess the question, I don't know much about your program, Manoj, but what I would say is that right now, we have seen all of the fault lines of inequality really laid bare across the country. We've seen like the income inequality, the challenges faced by people who live in low-income communities really stand out. I think for our organizations that work with young people with disabilities, my biggest concerns are, one, how do we make sure, like this is from an education standpoint, how do we make sure that young people with disabilities are still going to be welcomed into school and that they're getting an equal amount of access to their rights. And by that, I mean their right to education, their right to food, especially when physical spaces are going to be more difficult to access. And there's a higher risk for people with disabilities who have potentially suppressed immune systems or other health challenges. How do we make sure that they're still able to access things? I think for adults with disabilities, my fear would be as jobs are getting cut, that they stand to be the biggest losers, and that it will be harder to justify the roles that they're playing in organizations. And that is something that is really concerning to me. We've had a lot of young people that we have worked with and helped get placed into jobs, get placed in the service industry. So I mean by that, like restaurants and various eateries and retailers. Those places are all closed now. So that is it's a concern, and I think the more that you can sound the alarm about making sure that solutions are inclusive and that we consider the intersectionality of disability with the solutions that we're creating. So it's just really important. So hats off to you, and if there's anything that we can do to support your work in this, we'd love to do that and to connect you to other people who are doing the same.
Fantastic, Barry. I think we're coming to a close to the session. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I applaud you and your team for doing great work. We at Meraklis also are working in the same sphere, and we like to see how we can work together, and we'll keep that dialogue going. There'll be a lot of people who will be reaching out to you and to us, and I'm sure you'll be able to help and guide them in their endeavors. And on behalf of Team Meraklis, I thank you for giving us your time and the presentation. Stay safe and stay blessed, and thank you once again for being on the Online Impact Summit.